A loyal canine refused to stop digging deep inside a mountain forest, and what officers uncovered beneath the soil left everyone frozen in disbelief. From a rusted badge to something hidden for decades, each clue pulled them closer to a shocking truth. But the real question remains, what else was buried out there waiting to be found? Here's the full story. Before we get started, drop your favorite dog's name in the comments and make sure you've hit subscribe, because the next canine discovery coming up is even wilder than this one. The mountain forest stretched wide under the pale morning light, its slopes hidden in layers of mist that clung low to the ground. Pines towered silently, their branches heavy with the dampness of the night, and the air carried the sharp scent of moss and earth. It was the kind of place where silence held secrets, where shadows seemed to shift even when nothing moved. That morning, the forest appeared ordinary, but the canine unit sent there would soon discover something that would haunt their thoughts forever. The dog, a seasoned German shepherd named Rex, was brought to the forest trail after reports of unusual activity in the area. Locals had spoken of abandoned campsites, strange tools left behind, and faint trails that led deeper into the wilderness. To the officers, it was little more than routine. Perhaps hunters, perhaps wanderers passing through. But Rex had already sensed something different the moment his paws touched the damp earth. He was restless, sniffing hard at the ground, pulling against his lead with an urgency his handler had not seen before. The deeper they went into the trees, the more determined the dog became. It was as though something beneath the surface called out to him, something hidden in the silence of the mountain. About an hour into the trek, the team reached a clearing where fallen leaves had gathered in thick piles. Rex stopped cold. His muscles stiffened, ears sharp, and his gaze fixed on a patch of soil that looked no different from the rest. Then, without hesitation, he began digging furiously. Dirt flew behind him in powerful bursts, his paws cutting through the damp soil with unwavering focus. The officers exchanged uncertain glances. Nothing about the spot looked unusual, yet Rex would not stop. He clawed deeper, growling low as though he sensed something buried far below. The ground was hard, roots twisted through it, but he pressed on, ignoring his handler's calls. It was not obedience driving him now. It was instinct. Every scrape of his paws raised more questions. Why here? What lay hidden beneath? Was it tied to the abandoned campsites nearby, or something worse? The officers could not ignore the dog's persistence. They marked the spot and prepared to dig, but the soil resisted, thick and layered with stone. It would take tools, patience, and time to uncover whatever had drawn the dog so powerfully. By late afternoon, the digging had revealed fragments, small, broken pieces that sent a chill through the team. Old scraps of fabric clung to the soil, discolored and frayed with age. A shard of rusted metal appeared next, its surface eaten by time, its purpose unclear. Rex barked sharply at each discovery as if urging them not to stop. The sun began to set behind the ridges, shadows stretching long across the forest floor. The team had to retreat for the night, leaving the disturbed patch of earth under guard. Yet none of them could shake the feeling that something important lay beneath, something that would explain the unease that seemed to linger in the mist around them. That night, Rex paced endlessly at the camp set up nearby. He whined, pawed at the ground, and stared into the darkness as if watching something no one else could see. His handler tried to calm him, but the dog's instincts could not be dismissed. Whatever had been touched in the soil was only the beginning, and Rex seemed to know it. Morning came heavy with fog. The digging resumed, this time with shovels and picks. The ground yielded slowly, layer by stubborn layer. Hours passed, and the unease deepened with every strike of metal into earth. Then, just when doubt began to set in, the first undeniable clue emerged. It was wood, aged and splintered, buried deep under the soil. Not the natural wood of roots or fallen branches. This was carved, shaped, and man-made. Rex barked wildly, his claws scrabbling at the edges as though desperate to unearth it all. The officers worked faster, uncovering what appeared to be the rotting remains of a small box, its surface sealed long ago and forgotten in the forest floor. The box was fragile, crumbling at the edges as they pulled it free. Dirt clung to its sides, and the smell of damp age clung to the air. No one spoke. The silence of the mountain pressed down heavier than ever, broken only by Rex's growls and the labored breathing of men who felt the weight of mystery in their hands. Inside, beneath the cracked lid, were more fragments. Yellowed papers folded tight, their ink faded almost beyond recognition. A length of rope stiff with time, a broken pocket knife with its blade rusted through. Nothing about the contents made sense, not yet, but Rex would not leave the box. He sniffed it, pawed it, barked sharply again and again as though the answer was not in what they saw, but in what still remained hidden. The officers pressed on. The soil around the spot was dug wider, deeper. Hours passed, each layer pulling them further from routine and closer to something extraordinary. And then, as evening shadows returned, a second discovery sent a shiver down their spines. A skeletal hand emerged from the soil, pale bones curled in the earth. Rex lunged forward, his bark echoing through the silent forest. The hand was only the beginning. More fragments followed, ribs, pieces of a skull, remains that had been buried long ago and left forgotten under the weight of forest and time. The team froze. Questions crashed in all at once. Who was this? How long had they been here? And why was the body hidden with strange fragments of rope, rusted tools, and faded papers? Rex stood guard over the site, chest heaving, eyes burning with a focus only he could understand. His bark had brought them here. His paws had uncovered the earth. And now, in the growing dark, his instincts had revealed a secret that would demand answers. The discovery was reported immediately. Authorities secured the site, calling in experts and forensic teams. But even as the area filled with new faces and cautious steps, Rex never moved far from the grave. He watched, restless, his body tense as though waiting for the truth to rise from the soil itself. The forest had kept its silence for years, maybe decades, but the dog had broken it, and though the mystery was far from solved, the first piece of the puzzle had been placed. The skeleton, the box, the fragments, they were threads waiting to be connected. For now, one question haunted every mind present. Why had Rex, in all the vast wilderness of the mountain forest, chosen this exact spot? The mountain forest became a hive of hushed activity after the first discovery. The quiet clearing where Rex had clawed the earth was now circled with caution tape, its perimeter guarded as experts moved carefully over the soil. Shovels were replaced with brushes and tools built for precision. The officers stood back, their eyes drawn again and again to the skeletal remains that had risen from the earth. Rex never strayed far. His paws were still damp with dirt, his nose pressed often against the disturbed ground, as though he could sense more beneath the surface. The bond between man and dog had always been one of trust, but that day it deepened into something more. Without Rex, the forest would have kept its silence forever. The forensic team unearthed the skeleton piece by piece, laying the bones carefully in protective cases. They noted the age of the remains, decades old at least, the forest having claimed them long before any search could have been launched. But the condition of the burial suggested intention. The body had not simply been lost to the wilderness. It had been hidden, deliberately buried, marked with rope, tools, and scraps that meant something once. Though now they only raised more questions. The papers inside the rotting box were examined. Most of the ink had bled into smudges, leaving only fragments legible. One word repeated itself faintly across different sheets, coordinates, or perhaps names, but too blurred to confirm. The rope bore signs of fraying, the fibers stiff as though it had been pulled taut with violence before being buried. The knife, broken but unmistakably carried once by hand, seemed more personal than random. The officers struggled to understand. If this had been a crime, who had covered it up? If it had been an accident, why bury the remains with such deliberate care? Even as questions mounted, Rex grew restless again. He circled the site repeatedly, nose low to the ground, his body stiff. Then he stopped. Just beyond the first dig, his head jerked sharply to the side and he barked with a ferocity that made the team tense. He pawed at the soil again, not where the skeleton had been, but a few feet away, as though the mystery did not end with the first grave. The decision was made to dig further. Experts widened the perimeter, carefully slicing away the earth. At first it seemed like nothing, just more soil and roots. But Rex was insistent, his claws striking at the ground until the tools revealed what he had already sensed. Another box, smaller this time but sealed tightly, its wooden surface warped with age. When pried open, it revealed bundles wrapped in cloth. The fabric crumbled at the edges, but inside were coins, tarnished yet unmistakably valuable. Old currency, perhaps hidden for safekeeping, now long forgotten. Mixed within the coins was a locket, its surface dented, its chain tangled in the cloth. Inside the locket was the faded photograph of a woman, her features blurred but her eyes still haunting, staring back from a time that had long passed. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The skeleton was no longer just an anonymous set of bones. The box suggested attachment, perhaps family, perhaps love. Whoever had been buried here had been connected to someone, their memory locked away as carefully as the objects buried with them. Still, Rex was not done. He sniffed further, pawed harder. The soil to him was not just dirt, it was a map, and he followed it with a certainty no human could match. The forensic team followed his lead, slowly uncovering yet another fragment, this time a rusted badge. The inscription was faint, but under the grime it revealed what looked like the remnants of law enforcement insignia. The discovery struck like a cold wave. Had the skeleton been a missing officer? Had someone in uniform disappeared decades ago in these very mountains, their story lost until a dog unearthed it from silence? The fragments were pieced together with care, each one adding weight to the unanswered questions. A rope that hinted at restraint, a knife broken in struggle, a locket with a woman's face, coins hidden away as though part of a secret, and now a badge. The officers at the scene felt the gravity of it settle on their shoulders. If this had been one of their own, hidden away in an unmarked grave, then the forest was not just concealing tragedy, it was concealing betrayal. As daylight faded, the work slowed. The experts packed the evidence carefully, promising analysis and answers. Yet the mystery seemed to deepen with every artifact, not lessen. Rex, however, showed no sign of stopping. Even in the dusk, he circled, ears sharp, eyes glowing in the fading light. He refused to rest, as if the ground itself whispered truths only he could hear. Night settled over the mountain forest with unsettling quiet. The mist thickened again, curling around the trees, muffling sound, swallowing light. The officers camped near the site, their minds restless, their thoughts circling the same questions over and over. Who had been buried? Who had left these fragments? And why had it been hidden so deep in the wilderness? Rex did not sleep. He lay with his head up, eyes fixed on the darkened tree line, ears twitching at the faintest crack of branch or whisper of wind. His chest rose and fell with steady breaths, but tension rippled through his muscles. His handler, watching him, could not shake the feeling that the dog knew more, that his instincts stretched beyond scent and sound, into something deeper, something almost unexplainable. The following morning brought a startling development. Under the pale light, the forensic team continued their careful work. Rex again pulled toward the ground, this time at the base of a tree just beyond the original site. The soil here looked disturbed, not fresh but not untouched either. When they began digging, their tools struck something hard within minutes. What they uncovered was not another skeleton, not another box, but something that tied the fragments together in a way that made the air heavy with dread. A rusted revolver, its chamber still loaded, its barrel eaten away by time but unmistakable in form. Beside it, faint but visible, were remnants of leather, a holster degraded yet still carrying the shape of its purpose. The revolver had been buried intentionally, its weight heavy with history. The badge, the skeleton, the weapon, it all painted a picture too grim to ignore. This had not been an accident. This had been deliberate. Someone had died violently here, their body hidden, their story erased, until Rex had clawed through the earth to bring it back. But there was one final piece, still hidden in the soil, waiting for its turn to speak. As the revolver was lifted from the ground, Rex growled low, pulling again toward the edge of the disturbed earth. His claws struck a small object, something metallic. When uncovered, it revealed a tag, bent and corroded, with numbers etched faintly across its surface. The kind of tag that belonged to a person, to an identity, to a story now on the verge of being told. The sight was sealed once more, but the weight of what had been uncovered was undeniable. The skeleton of a man, a badge, a revolver, a locket with a woman's face, coins buried in cloth, a knife, a rope, and papers that whispered faint words through faded ink. It was not random, it was not coincidence. It was a story buried deliberately piece by piece in the silence of the mountain, and Rex had been the one to drag it back into the light. The officers stood silent as the evidence was carried away, their minds heavy. This was no longer just a discovery, it was the unraveling of something that had been meant to stay hidden forever. And yet, as Rex sat near the disturbed earth, his eyes sharp and unblinking, it felt as though he knew. The forest had not yet given all its secrets. The mystery was only halfway uncovered. The mountain forest did not return to silence after the discoveries. Even as the remains, artifacts, and evidence were carefully transported from the site, the air seemed charged with a weight of unfinished business. The officers who had stood in that clearing carried the images with them, the skeletal hand emerging from the soil, the locket with a woman's blurred photograph, the rusted revolver, and the faint badge. Each piece was like a fragment of a sentence waiting to be read in full. Rex, the dog who had unearthed it all, remained restless. His instincts had pulled the team from one clue to another, and now, though the digging had stopped, he seemed unwilling to leave the mountain altogether. He sniffed the trail leading away from the clearing, circled repeatedly, and paused often to stare into the trees as though the story stretched further still. Back in the nearest town, the evidence was laid out under careful watch. Forensic specialists worked through the night. The bones were aged, confirming what had been suspected. The man had died decades ago. The rope showed wear consistent with restraint. The revolver was registered to a law enforcement agency from nearly 40 years earlier, and the badge, though corroded, matched records from that same time period. Slowly, a name surfaced. The skeleton belonged to a police officer who had gone missing over 3 decades earlier. His disappearance had been marked as unsolved, lost somewhere in the vast mountain terrain during what was believed to be a routine patrol. No trace of him had been found, and in time his file had gathered dust in storage. But Rex had changed that. His instincts had dragged the truth back into the light. The locket provided the first emotional thread. It was traced back to a woman who had once lived in the nearby town, a woman who had spent years searching for answers after her fiancé, the officer, had vanished. She had passed away long before the truth was uncovered, never knowing what had become of him. The photograph in the locket was hers, an image preserved in soil, sealed beside the man who had carried it until his final breath. The coins were another piece of the puzzle. At first they seemed random, but records revealed that the officer had been investigating a string of thefts at the time of his disappearance. Small stashes of valuables had been reported missing from homes and cabins in the surrounding area. The discovery of the old coins in the forest suggested that the officer had stumbled onto whoever was responsible. The rusted knife and revolver told the darker part of the story. The knife had broken in struggle. The revolver, still loaded, suggested the officer had not been given the chance to fire it. Instead, he had been overpowered, restrained, and buried in the forest by whoever sought to silence him. The forest had kept his secret for decades, until Rex dug it up, yet there remained one more piece, the bent metal tag. When cleaned and examined under light, it revealed a number tied not to the officer, but to a logging company that had operated in the mountains at the same time. That company had been shut down amid rumors of corruption, theft, and workers disappearing under suspicious circumstances. The officer had likely discovered more than petty theft. He had uncovered something deeper, something that someone powerful had wanted buried. The realization brought a solemn hush over the investigation team. The man had not simply vanished in the wilderness, he had died protecting the truth. His sacrifice had been hidden by time, but now, thanks to Rex, it had been uncovered. The case, though decades old, was officially closed with his identity confirmed. His remains were returned with honor, his name restored, his record amended to reflect not disappearance but service. A ceremony was arranged, one that brought together the community, officers past and present, and families who had carried unanswered questions for years. Rex stood at the center of it all, his handler at his side. The dog who had clawed at the soil in the mountain forest now stood tall, ears sharp, as the flag-draped casket passed before him. To everyone present, it was clear. Without him, the forest would have kept its silence forever. The old officer's surviving relatives, nieces and nephews who had only heard stories of the man they never met, finally had answers. Tears mixed with gratitude as they touched the locket, now cleaned and preserved, the photograph of the woman inside still faint but recognizable. The two had been separated in life, but in death, the locket had ensured they would not be parted. For the community, the discovery was more than closure. It was a reminder of sacrifice, of how silence can last for years until truth claws its way back into daylight. For the police force, it was a rediscovery of one of their own, a chance to honor a man whose story had been hidden for too long. And for Rex, it was instinct fulfilled. His digging had not been random. His paws had unearthed a story of loyalty, betrayal, and forgotten history. He had given voice to the voiceless, carrying out the work that humans alone could not. As the ceremony ended, sunlight broke through the clouds, streaming across the mountain ridges in golden beams. It felt as though the forest itself had exhaled, its burden lifted at last. The grave that once held silence now held remembrance. The officer was laid to rest properly, his story complete, his name honored. The locket was placed in the hands of his family, the coins preserved as evidence of the case he had been pursuing. The revolver, the badge, the knife, all were archived with respect, pieces of a puzzle finally assembled. The mystery was solved, the tragedy uncovered, and the ending, though marked by loss, carried peace. Rex returned to his duties, his bond with his handler stronger than ever. To those who witnessed his determination in the forest, he was more than just a working dog. He was the hero who had refused to walk away from a secret buried in the soil. The mountain forest, once heavy with silence, now carried a different memory, not of what was hidden, but of what had been found. For decades, questions had lingered. Thanks to a K-9's relentless digging, the answers had finally come. And in that, there was both justice and a measure of happiness. The officer had not been forgotten. His story had been brought home. If you like this story, just wait till you hear what our next K-9 uncovered. You don't want to miss it. Hit that subscribe button and like this video now, because the next mystery drops soon. And trust me, it's even more unbelievable than this one.